I'm gonna uh, put back up the screensaver for those of you who came in late, or for our folks joining us on YouTube later, just to introduce the theme for today. Yes, there we go. This was my first meditation teacher back in 1972, back in the 20th century. And when I first read his book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, I was puzzled by this phrase, this sentence that he used. He said, "So we need some rules to attain absolute freedom." And it's sort of, for where my consciousness was back then, it seemed like even either a paradox or what the Zen guys call a koan didn't seem to add up. We need some rules to attain absolute freedom. I gradually learned what that meant as I tried to teach high school down in Texas with a bunch of cowboys in my room. Uh, but what he was talking about was deeper than that. But he was talking about freedom, and so uh, that's the that's the topic for today. It's going to be on freedom, and actually, probably the way it'll be listed on YouTube would be on freedom, large and small, because that's sort of what I want to cover today in two parts. And the large part is sort of, we're living in uh, a community, a large community of over 350 million people in what we call the United States. And so I want to just give you my take, my meditation on what Suzuki meant, and also how we can apply it to being a citizen in a very large nation. Um, and again, just feel free to email me, looseleafhollow@gmail.com, if you want the notes from today's session. Often, because of time, uh, I don't give everything that I have on my notes, which I've been working on for about a week. But you could get that. Plus, if there's something else that you missed and you'd want to quote or something, you could always email me for it. Just say notes, and I'll send it to you, including all the music we used today. Ben Franklin, one of the founders of our country, was asked by another citizen, "Well, doctor, what have we got? A republic or a monarchy?" And Franklin replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." We had, stepped away, revolted, fought to get some distance to be free of a monarchy where one man called all the shots. It was a man, King George, but uh, and then we had to fashion a republic where we found a way to be free of the monarchy, but also to increase the aspiration was to increase the freedom and rule ourselves. Uh, so I want to look at it. I want to just mention a couple of dangerous myths that I think, again, this is, for what it's worth, this is my view of it. Well, first dangerous myth when you're thinking about freedom is freedom is the freedom from rules. And Suzuki was talking about that. We tend to think absolute freedom would be have no rules. You could do whatever you want. Cole Porter wrote a great song called "Anything Goes." Well, Suzuki didn't buy that. I don't buy it. Uh, Freedom is more than the freedom from rules. But a lot of people are pushing that idea now. And so what you'll hear is this word a lot. Just be aware of what it means. Deregulation. We're going to deregulate everything. We're going to get rid of all these rules. Then we'll be freer. Well, deregulation does not equal freedom. It means, you're free to buy meat that's tainted. We'll get rid of all those regulations, guys checking things to make sure they're safe, things like that. Get rid of the Department of Education. Just let people learn on their own. So that's worth And that's what Suzuki's talking about. If you want freedom, let alone absolute freedom, he's talking about the whole kahuna, which we're not, talking about here. We're talking about freedom in a country, but then there's inner freedom. But he says it needs some rules. Uh, so that's one myth. The idea that freedom is freedom from rules. So the fewer the rules we have, the more free we are. I don't buy that. You might, but I don't. The second myth I think that's dangerous is we became great as a nation because we are a white Christian nation. That's what we want to go back to, some people. And it's important to realize the context we're in. We just had an election in which a third of this country who was registered to vote did not vote. So then what we actually had, what the results were of that two-thirds of our voting public, of the two-thirds, how did that fare? Well, one side got a sliver more of that, maybe a little bit more than a third of the voters who voted that could vote, slightly under a half of the voters that did vote. And then that was the Republicans. The Democrats came up short about a point and a half, percentage point and a half. But you got to remember, that's all of that is less than half of two-thirds of all of us who are of voting age and could vote were registered to vote. Yeah. And so the second myth, I think, is, well, there's a myth that there's some kind of mandate here. We got to really relativize that and say, well, yeah, maybe. I don't know why people vote for anybody, but maybe, people bought this was very much a part of the pitch from the Republican Party that we want to be great again and be a white Christian nation. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm just telling you that's what seemed to be out there. And now, just put all that in. If in the 18th century, when we forged our own nation, we had a bunch of rules. That was a constitution. We felt we needed some guidelines. To be honest, if you look back into it, it was written to solidify power for the rich white Christian men. Really, you had to be a landowner, which means rich, to vote. In the beginning, you had to be white and you had to be a man, and most of the men were Christian. So that was sort of how it was designed. When you wonder about the Electoral College, the basis of that was like in the slave states, there were many more black slaves than white people, and so they got to tinkering around, to just, because you couldn't count the black people at that point. They weren't human according to even the founders, although some thought they were. But and so they had to rig up a lot of things to get around that, so that in Kentucky, for instance, when it became a state, there's two-thirds of the population were black. And so if they couldn't vote, if they couldn't be counted as part of your population, so the whole Electoral College came out of that. But, two centuries down the line, thank goodness, due to the Bill of Rights, which were the first 10 amendments, and the whole amendments process, even though they had a certain consciousness there, they also had a kind of great consciousness that said, well, as time goes on, maybe we'll have to change this document a little bit. And so that's how we got all the amendments. But they had the first 10. The first one would be freedom of speech, freedom of religion. So we, the people, has evolved to include more and more of us, even women, 1920, we could have women got the right to vote. People of other races got right to vote. So I think it leaves you, when we're really thinking about what freedom means in this country, which is the first thing I want to talk about. There's a big question facing all of us now. And I don't mean just all of us here at Heart to Heart, but I think this should be the question. Do we want to continue to evolve as a multicultural, multiracial nation or not? That's really the question, because that's what we have evolved. including letting women vote, letting people of color vote, letting anybody who's become American citizen vote, despite their, whatever their religion is, whatever their culture. Right? Do we want to be a multicultural, multiracial nation or not? Well, that's your question as well as my question. Yeah, I am on firmly and a yes on that, just by observing nature every day when I walk. Nature is strong when it's diverse. Nature by itself, it keeps going. This planet is keeping going despite what we're doing to it, and it is about diversity. You look in the wilderness, you see diversity. In a forest, you see diversity. Uh, in a meadow, you see diversity. I see it every day when I walk the road, like I did today. So I think diversity is strength. I think it's what made this country, in a way, as powerful as we have become. Uh, you know, we weren't great because we're a white Christian nation. There was a whole lot of black folks and Indians in the beginning, Native Americans in the beginning. The Pilgrims would have starved without them. And then all this labor that where we made a terrific amount of capital and money and slavery. There's things we need to look at, things we need to reckon with. Uh, but just the idea we'll go back to when everything was great, when everybody was just white and Christian. That's there's just no data for that, and that is what some people think would make us great again. I just disagree. So it's up for you to think about that, and that's sort of looking at. But I think freedom, when you consider, my daughter's going to Australia in June, and I don't know what the Australians think about this, but you have to vote there if you don't vote in the election, because they see that as part of being an Australian, part of being in this group. You need to weigh in on these issues, and I don't know exactly how it works. Maybe if you don't vote, they fine you. I don't know, but that's a rule there. And we had a third of the people that we didn't hear from here, and even though the turnout was bigger, which is good because people were mobilized, it was only about 2/3 of Americans who could vote voted. But so do we want to get rid of all the rules, or do we want, these are questions. But going back to Suzuki, uh, we need some rules to attain absolute freedom. Yeah. So I think the that's my pitch, or at least my view, which is all I'm ever giving on freedom in a huge nation like we have. There's lots of other questions that come from that. Where I want to switch to looking at the small picture, which is not small in importance to me. Our own heart-to-heart community, and I think, and to me, this is a beloved community. This is my beloved community. When Martin Luther King talked about the beloved community, this is what he was talking about. And I was just writing about it this morning and just finished up my notes. And I wrote down the only way we can create a beloved community is by being a community that practices loving kindness. I think that's, you can't get it any other way. So Jill and I have been meditating on how we can become a freer, kinder, more loving, beloved community. And so we're going to share some thoughts. Jill shared some thoughts last week, but I wasn't here and not everybody was here. And so we wanted to make it a little bit more, our thoughts on this a little bit more permanent and visible. So I'm going to share something that we came up with, and then we'll try to flesh it out a little bit. See if I can get the screensaver up while we talk. Well, do I have Suzuki on the screen? What do I have?
It's the heart-to-heart preamble.
I'm just not seeing it here. Okay, God.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, go. In this moment, what does kindness ask of us? And she's gonna do three of them. I'm gonna do two of them, just to make it clearer for all of us. Okay, so go ahead, Jill.
Yeah. Joe, you just said making it visible, and I keep getting this image of like things emerging from the fog, and then they take shape. Or I was also thinking, a long time ago, I said that thing about the archaeological dig where you're sort of brushing away the dust. So this is just our sort of attempt to make the invisible visible. The first one, listen with the ear of your heart. I saw, I don't know if you can see this because I can't see myself, the rule of Saint Benedict, listen with the ear of your heart. I was thinking about what does this mean? And it's letting go of like the preconceived answers or prejudices or assumptions that we have, which are also known as thoughts, and being open and receptive to something new that can come in, that breath of fresh air or that new current in the river. And we have the opportunity to practice that actually in all three parts of this meeting, in the beginning when we're having the inspiration, in the middle during contemplation, and then at the end during conversation, all three. And then I thought I could really challenge myself to do this all the time, listening with the ear of the heart. So that is the first guideline, I would say, is to drop from head to heart and let your listening come from here.
Oh, thanks, Jill. Yeah, and this preamble is about really the third section where we get to listen and speak. But Jill's right. It goes through all the sections. Especially purely in the second section we're going to go to next, which is to just sit in sacred silence and try to listen as deep as we can to what is sacred. Now, the second thing, to speak from your heart to the community. This is why I really say this is the essence of heart to heart, because we're not here just to, just talk about the things of the day or to give information. It's different. When to speak from the heart is to, as we're sitting here in silence, listening deeply. If something deeply rises from out of the silence, and you just feel like, yeah, I'd like to share this with the heart of the group, then when you get a chance, you can unmute and share that. This is sort of like deep speaking to deep. It's not primarily about information sharing. It's about wisdom sharing, because what comes up out of your heart, the heart is the vessel of wisdom, you see. It doesn't mean, you have to sound like Gandhi or anything, or uh, like Martin Luther King. It just means that it sort of rises from the deep, and then you can share it. But it's wisdom from your heart to the whole community. This is not just any kind of conversation, because a lot of conversation, doesn't belong here. Yeah, yeah. So keep that in mind. And when you do any of this, the sitting, what I do is, if you catch yourself waiting for somebody to say something, drop the waiting. That's very anxious, and just breathe. That's the easiest way to listen from the ear of the heart that I've found. Especially keep yourself vigilant for when you're just waiting for the next person to talk. And waiting is, who likes to wait? Just drop it and breathe while they're speaking, so that somehow that helps you listen and speak from the heart. Okay, Joe can do three.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, speaking of waiting and the anxiety, one of my thoughts when we're talking about limiting your share to about 2 to 3 minutes is silence is okay. It's really okay to just let it be quiet. The silence doesn't need to be filled up with words. And actually, I think that silence is important because there may be somebody kind of getting their courage up to speak. And when we're just filling up the silence with words, they may never get that chance. And so that's what this is also about too, just understanding that there are a lot of us on this meeting, and that I would hate to take up too much time that then meant someone else couldn't speak who really felt like they wanted to. I also thought that the heart is very brief and succinct. When I am in my mind, that's where my stories live. That's where all my justifications live. And that's not even a really great place for me to be anyway. The share is sort of a sacred gift. I think about when Joe says, what's bringing you life and what's killing you. It can be something joyful. It can be something really awful, then some struggle that you're going through. But it is a sacred gift. And I have this picture of like placing it on the altar of this group. It is a gift for the rest of us to witness. And it is about being seen and allowing us to see you. Last week, Linda was talking about tension in the body and how even just noticing it helped it dissipate, which is why witnessing is so important. So to be witnessed and to witness, and understanding and allowing the maximum number of people to share if they so choose. Joe, if you want to take number 4.
Yeah, and we have over 40 people here, and normally we have at most 40 minutes for the third meditation. So do the math. Not everybody is going to have the need or the grace to share at any given time. But even if you cut it in half, 20 people times 2 would just about do it. And so we're not going to ring a bell or cut anybody off, but just try to make that a kind of internal thing, and then more people will get a chance to speak. And what we can do is also double dipping. People have done this and they've said, "Oh, I'm sorry to have to do this." Well, don't. It's stealing time from someone else. And if you've spoken already, if there's something you just have to say to me or somebody else, send me an email. If it's to somebody else, I'll try to connect you. But let's just leave that out. The numbers don't. It's just not kind. No matter what you have to say. And if you just have to say something, send me an email or call me up. And then if it goes to another person, fine. And that would even go with, with AI now, you put little hearts up there and whatever. We're not like Instagram, we don't have to do that. That's really commenting on some, and then somebody speaks and they get no hearts. And they're thinking, well, what's wrong with what I've said? How come I didn't get any heart? So let's try to, just, it is a gift, and to receive that gift, you don't have to pat somebody on the back. We're all big people. We don't need stars on our foreheads, little gold stars. So that would also be like crosstalk. Crosstalk is also in your share to refer to somebody else's share. And it's happened in this over the 4 years. It's inevitable that's why we're not here to fix anybody. We're not here to set anybody straight, and we're not here to tell anybody to evaluate them in any way, because that's not why we're here. And so that covers it. You just stay away from that. And from time to time, you just need to remember that, because, we need to remember. Yeah. And then, okay, the 5th.
Yeah. So with what you just said, Joe, I'm thinking about like in 12-step meetings, when I've been in person and someone might share something that really had an effect on me, what I will do is try to grab them after the meeting to have a one-on-one conversation. Now, we're not in person, so that makes it a little more tricky. But as Joe just said, if somebody says something that you really want to respond to, he will put you in touch with that person. I can do it too. I've done it. People have emailed me and I've put people in touch. So, yes, people say some things that are really meaningful, and yes, we want to respond. And so there are other ways to do that and avoid crosstalk in this particular situation. And then the last one, aspire to do no harm. We cannot control how our words land for other people, but I do think that this is about practicing mindfulness and thinking about what I'm going to say before it comes out. And even topics that are difficult have a different resonance when they come from the heart, which is love. So I think that if you're kind of considering and being mindful of the previous 4 guidelines, that you're going to land here. You don't have to be fretful and worried. And we also take responsibility for our own experience here. Again, thinking of last week, there was some guidance from the ancestors, and that was leave what isn't yours and take what is useful. So you don't have to absorb everything that's said here. You can take what works for you and leave the rest behind. But I also want to say, like in my professional life, I'm very aware of vicarious trauma and how unpleasant it is to receive like a drive-by trauma dump. And if you are in some sort of state where you just like really need to talk to somebody, I offer you are welcome to email me. I'm going to offer Joe too. And either we can listen or, find other resources, because sometimes that is an issue. But this is not the place for the trauma dump, because, vicarious trauma really is a thing. And we all carry our own wounds. And I certainly want to be thoughtful about how I treat others.
I think that's good.
All right.